everybody. Welcome to this episode of Turning to Him. My name is Zach Batty, and I am here with Taylor Cutler, who has taken time out of her day to share some of her experiences with us. Taylor, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on here.
Well, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some background.
Okay. I am a stay-at-home mom. I have two very little kids. One of them just turned one, a little girl, and then I have a 2.5-year-old boy. So they keep
Uh,
me very, very busy.
Congratulations. That's a fun age.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
Um, okay, now as we were speaking before, you mentioned that you kind of wanted to talk about there was a time of inactivity in your life.
Hmm.
Um, and then what brought you back, though, wasn't so much a grand spiritual experience, but kind of small and logical decisions that brought you back. Is that fair? Is that a fair description?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So first, describe, I guess, so we have a rough timeline. When was the period of inactivity?
Okay, so similar to you, I believe, in high school, my parents got divorced.
Yes.
I was a senior in high school, and I guess you could say it all started around then. Um, I My parents actually separated when I was 12 and got back together. And that healing of our family was such a foundational part of our family and our spirituality and my personal testimony that when they got divorced again, or separated in the divorce, it was kind of like, well, wait, what happened? Where did all of that go?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was in high school, and then into my college years
Okay.
that all of this occurred.
Okay, so since it's in high school, back up, explain your junior high life to me.
Junior high,
Uh,
very, very quiet. I was a very quiet girl.
okay.
I had a teacher who always said I never smiled ever. Um, I don't know what else to tell you. I don't remember a lot of junior high. I was just a very quiet person.
Would you consider your family active in the church?
Oh yeah, my dad was bishop I was born in Houston. He was bishop there. When we moved to Utah, he was bishop in Utah. Very active, very involved in the ward.
Okay.
Just like
Uh,
your the quintessential Utah family.
yeah. Okay. Do you have any brothers and sisters?
Five.
And where are you in those?
I'm the third girl, or the third. Sorry, I'm the third, but the oldest girl. So I'm
Okay.
like the third, but I'm also kind of like the oldest sometimes.
Yes, yes, yes. That makes sense. Okay, so you're growing up in a very active home. Gospel is a strong part of your life. That's
Mm-hmm.
fair to say. And then when you're 12, your parents get separated.
Yes,
What does that do to you?
it was, it was, it was a very weird. My dad was bishop at the time,
Okay.
and I go to church one day. Everyone's crying. My dad's released as bishop. I have no idea what's going on. Maybe my parents told me before that was about to happen. I don't remember. Um, it was just different. People just kind of like, it seems like kind of treated us differently. Like, oh, they have family issues now. Like that's weird. And people were nice, but it's just kind of a different, you feel like people are watching.
Okay. And that's interesting because I mean, the family of the bishop, you're being watched anyway.
Yeah,
And now the family of a bishop who, like you said, maybe has family issues, that's a different kind of watching.
it is. And before this had happened, a girl who was my age had said, because we knew a lot of people in our ward. We knew our neighbors. We were pranking our neighbors. We were just very active in the ward. And this girl said, I think it's really time that everyone gets over your family and pays attention to someone else's family. And girls were petty. And soon enough, she got her wish. People kind of moved on because our family was a tragedy now.
Oh, okay, that's tough for a 12-year-old to process.
Yeah. I remember being really annoyed with the new bishop because it was supposed to be my dad. So I was just always like,
Oh
so
yeah.
I kind of took it out on this new bishop, like, what does he think he's doing? He took my dad
Yeah,
falling, which is silly. It's silly,
sure,
but
sure. But understandable. I mean, yeah, you're 12 years old, like you said.
yeah.
Okay, so then what happens? Your parents are separated for, I'm sorry, no, your parents are divorced for a bit, but then
No, just
separate.
separated.
Thank
Yep.
you. Parents are separated for a bit and then they get back together. And you said that that was a fantastic experience for your family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Tell me about
it's
that.
just kind of this very spiritual blessing. Like we can do this. We could do hard things. We prayed, we fasted. This is God blessing us. That it was just kind of this miracle that we could all carry around. And it was exciting. And then and that lasted, oh, I'm trying to remember. So they were separated probably less than a year. So that lasted for probably about 5 or 6 years.
Okay. And then for how long were they together again?
About
Before,
about 5 and 6.
oh, I'm sorry,
About
5 and 6 years.
6 years. Yes, sorry. Yeah, they
Okay.
were separated for less than a year, and then when they got back together, we were a family again for about 5 to 6 years.
Okay. And then explain to me again what happens here when they announce we're getting divorced.
So this is not something I talk about for a lot of reasons. And
Sure.
one of the reasons is it's become clear to me that the experiences, when you go through a group trauma like this, the experiences of every person in that group, and maybe you can, agree with this, are so different.
Yes.
It's so weird to hear my siblings talk about the divorce because they'll say things and I'll be like, no, that is just not even true. But it's true to them, and that was their experience. So I don't talk about this because I don't want anyone who's listening to be like, oh, she thinks she experienced it this way, and you know what I mean. So I'll just tell you what I remember, and I don't know, but I remember it was a couple months after my 18th birthday, and my dad started to cry, and that's terrifying when you see someone like your dad crying. And I um he had made some comments about separating from my mom again, and I just kind of ignored them, and previous to this conversation, and he said, I'm just not happy, and I think I'm going to leave again. And in my memory, I knew I held this information for a couple of days before anyone else knew. And then it was Halloween of 2012. No, sorry, 2012, Halloween day. He sat everyone down. Somebody told me he sat us all down and said he was going to leave. I don't remember that happening, but and then he moved out, and it was it's hard to explain. This is another reason that I don't talk about it, because you just can't communicate what it's like.
Yeah.
But it was like a fog rested on our house. I would go to school and I'd come home, and right in front of my door, the door to my house, it was a fog. And you open that door and you enter it, and you don't smile. There's no happiness, there's no laughing. Don't talk to my mom, you know what I mean? Like, just don't make her cry, don't make anyone cry. It was just crazy. And then on my dad's side, visiting my dad, it's similar. It's just like he feels like, I just felt so much pressure, like to spend time with him and to help him, even though my mom is falling apart and I am falling apart. My oldest brother had just barely gotten married a month before my second oldest brother was on a mission. So I'm the oldest one in the house.
Mhm.
Um, and it was also awkward with the ward, because it's like, here it was happening again. We didn't really tell anybody, but I was the ward organist. And so I was sitting on the stand one Sunday, and somebody who did know was giving a talk. And I happened to also play a musical number in church. And he spoke right after. And he basically announced to the ward about my parents getting divorced. And I was sitting on the stand. So, of course, I feel like everyone's watching me, just bawling. I should have just left for a minute and composed myself, but I didn't. I just sat there and cried, and
Oh,
everyone was crying, and my family was, it was just like, it was rough,
yeah.
really rough. I mean, and I'm sure you can relate to how it is to be in high school with friends who are living it up their high school years while your family's falling apart.
Right, right. And you're thinking, how are you guys expressing happiness? Don't you understand that the world has ended? You don't get
Right.
that? What are you
Yeah,
doing? I don't I don't care about the dance this Friday. What?
exactly.
Okay, and you said that there was one younger individual in the home, younger sibling.
There were three youngers.
Oh, I'm sorry, three.
Mhm.
Okay. So yeah, I mean that's a totally different situation. Um, so you find yourself in a tough spot. Tell me what that did to your relationship to the Savior or with the Savior.
Yeah. Well, I basically stopped having one at that point. I was definitely angry. I just listened to an episode where you talked about, how it's so common to turn your anger to God. Definitely I did that. Um, I I think one of the biggest things was I felt so alone. You're going into high school where nobody really understands what you're going through. I'm going home where um, I don't feel like I have the emotional support I need because everyone needs it. And like my parents were great. I don't want to insult them at all, but we were all going through a huge trauma.
Sure.
Um, and so it's hard to have that, it's hard to support each other when you're all needing help. And I just felt forgotten and like I had nowhere to go. And you always hear stories in the church of like, oh, I was at my lowest, I was hurting, and there was a knock on my door. And I always was waiting for that knock. And I felt like it never ever came. Or when it did come, it would like end up being not at all what I thought.
Hmm. For how long did that last?
Um, I would say so. I shortly after that I moved away to college, which was a very hard decision, but I only moved 20 minutes away to college, so I was still close. Um, so through college, about 3 years.
All right. Now, at this time, I mean, you said you felt alone. Did you have any friends that you could rely on? I mean, was anybody on your team? And like you said, your family's great, but
Mhm.
they're going through their own trial. I mean, if you all are drowning in the ocean, it's hard to help each other swim.
Right.
Does anybody have a rowboat in your life? Is anybody helping with the ability to help?
Right. So that's one difficult thing about going through this in high school is your friends don't, most high school kids haven't gone through really hard things yet.
Yeah.
So I did have some friends and they would kind of reach out, but I kind of isolated myself a little bit too. And so I don't want to say that nobody tried to help me. I think it was partly my fault, partly me pushing people away. Um, but no, I didn't feel like there was one time where in um, in college, there was a girl in my ward who seemed really nice. She had just had an engagement fall through. So she was going through a hard time. And I thought, you know what? I can step outside myself a little bit. And I brought brownies to her, and it was such a great experience. And we became really close friends. And I thought, oh my gosh, like this is it. This is the person who's going to help me get through this, which is flawed thinking. But that was kind of my thought. Like, this is the knock on my door, even though I knocked on her door.
Right.
And we ended up being roommates. And then she turned on me and was terrible to me. And she said awful things like, you need to spend time at my house so you know what a good family is like.
Yeah.
Um, she was so awful to me. And it was just kind of like, what?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah. Yeah.
supposed to be, and I have one more example of that. This was before I kind of stopped going to church. I was not enjoying church, but I was still kind of going. And because I play the organ and I have a hard time saying no, I was going to fulfill my calling
Yes.
because I don't want to say no, even though I didn't want to be there. And I wasn't really sure I believed in it. And I had a singles word bishop call me into his office. And it was exactly the moment I was waiting for. Again, I didn't know him, but he said, your name has come into my mind. Like, I'm here for you. I can tell you need help. Um, I want to meet with you every week. It was wonderful. He was so awesome. And I was, again, like, finally, this is it. And I met with him twice. And at the second meeting, it was the last meeting of the Sunday. And I remember thinking, this guy is just like so righteous and so awesome. He could just be twinkled. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that was the last meeting of the Sunday. We walked out of the building together. He locked the building. We went our separate ways. The next morning, I got up, went to work, got a call from my roommate, and she said, come home right now. And this bishop had gone out for a run and had a heart attack and died in a Target bathroom all by himself. And to someone who was already struggling, this was such a hit because it felt like a joke. It felt like if there's a God, he's mocking me right now.
Yeah.
Because not only was this man going to help me and now he's gone, but he was such a wonderful man and he died in such a like a lonely way and tragic way. And he had one son coming home from a mission and the other one about to get married. And like when you're already struggling with a testimony, that kind of experience, it's like the opposite of a pillar of light conversion story, right?
Right. Right.
It's like, wow, what do I believe here? So
Yeah.
it was not a helpful experience for me.
Taylor, I so appreciate you being very real with your feelings because I think a lot of people feel this way in their own experiences. Um, I mean, I don't know that a lot of people have had an experience of their favorite bishop dying of a heart attack, but I think a lot of people have felt exactly what you've said. God is mocking me.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't even know if I believe in God. And second of all, garbage like this happens.
Right.
This is not adding up well for me.
Right.
And I think that, again, a lot of people feel that way, but sometimes we're afraid to admit that or afraid to talk about that. But we have to. That's part of life. And
It
that's
is.
part of a lot of people's experience.
Right.
Would
Right.
you go ahead?
I was just gonna say, and there are a lot of worse experiences than that too. Just
For sure.
it's crazy out there.
Would you consider this the spiritual low for you at this point?
Probably not even quite yet.
Okay.
I was still kind of going to church at least.
Yeah.
Um, there was a point. I was also um I ended up majoring in philosophy,
Okay.
which like this combination isn't great because philosophy
Yeah.
can be so like anti-religion, right? And it wasn't necessarily anti-religion, but it really challenges you to think.
Right.
Uh, and and so I did eventually stop attending church, and I never like went crazy and rebellious and did crazy things. Like I wasn't off doing drugs, I wasn't drinking. Um, but I definitely was thinking about the things I was hearing in school, and I was thinking about myself and like what really do I believe?
Yeah. And I think in my college career, I took a lot of philosophy classes, and I
Okay.
think it's not it's not that thinking equates to losing your testimony by any stretch of the imagination,
Mhm.
but in my experience, um, it's it's not just the philosophy classes, but it is typically, not always, but typically the type of student that those classes attract and the type of students that are majoring in that are oftentimes those who don't thrive in religion and are sophistry and um, sometimes have an air about them where they have outgrown this childish idea of religion. Like
Yes.
I don't need that. That's cute
Yes.
for you country hillbillies, but I'm
Right.
an educated thinker. Okay.
Totally.
I studied Descartes. Okay. Like, all right. Why don't you just take it easy there?
Exactly.
But so yeah, I can see how that can be a very tough environment to be in for somebody who is struggling spiritually.
Right. And I've never been a person who likes to talk about feelings. I don't like to be vulnerable. I almost canceled coming on this podcast 7 times. Um, I just don't like feelings and emotions.
Yeah.
And I think philosophy also attracts that, where you like the logic, you like to think things through, and the emotion stuff is just frilly silliness.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so this is where you find yourself. And at some point, I assume at some point during this, you say, I'm not going to go to church anymore. The organ can play itself. I'm out.
Yes.
Okay. Um, how long do you stay there?
Hey, this is all very fuzzy. I was just in a very dark place, and memories don't line themselves up neatly when you're in a dark place. So I wouldn't even say it was that long. But when my bishop passed away, that was probably 2013. And so through 2013, 14, and probably a good chunk of 2015 as well. So a couple years.
Okay. What changes?
So this is where this theme of like big experiences and small choices comes into play. So I have obviously the friends I'm surrounding myself with are in similar situations as me, where they're questioning the church, not really active. And I have one friend who comes to me, and he is also really into philosophy, and he says, "Hey, I'm thinking about leaving the church." And I ended up going to law school. I really like being the devil's advocate. I like arguing in a friendly way. And so, of course, my response to him, even though clearly I don't care if he stops going to church, is like, well, why? That's stupid. And he talks about the logic thing, like, you can't, you can't logically prove religion. And he goes into, the logical fallacies of religion that he's heard about. And I was like, well, what's so great about logic? If you think about our entertainment, what makes entertainment great to us? It's the emotional aspect. What makes our relationships great? Logic? No, it's the emotional ties that we have with people. Like, that's what makes life basically worth living. And it's not frilly sissy stuff. Like, that is everything. And so I don't know why we accept this I don't know if lie is too strong of a word, that like things have to make sense logically to make sense and to be worth it. And I guess that resonated with him. And then the other point I made was, I remember learning in one of my classes this principle of science called the PUN, the principle of uniformity of nature.
Okay.
That basically means because one thing happens one way, it's going to continue to happen that way in the future. I'm not a scientist, so I hope you don't get comments about this, but basically, why do we think the sun's going to come up tomorrow? Because it's come up every day in
Yes.
recorded history. Okay, so we have really good evidence that the sun's going to come up tomorrow, but we're still putting faith in it. There is still an element of faith in everything in science. And yeah, is there a lot of evidence for something? Sure. But there's still a lot of faith, and science changes all the time. So when you're coming to me, it's kind of what I said to this guy. When you're coming to me saying like logic and science are better than religion, I'm going to argue with you there, because emotion does absolutely play a good role in our life, and science is basically founded on this principle that can't be proven. So there you go. And I guess for the time being, it was enough for him. I don't know where he's at now in his life, but for the time being, I accidentally convinced him to stay in the church.
You accidentally.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I think it's an important perspective to maintain that, look, science and religion are not fighting. They're not butting heads. Absolute truth exists and it is out there. What changes is our understanding of it and our perspective. And there's always the idea of, the seven blind man feeling an elephant. And what is an elephant like? No, it's the trunk, it's the leg, it's the tail. that doesn't mean that there isn't an elephant. And that doesn't mean that an omniscient God doesn't see the entire elephant. So
Mm-hmm.
at some point, and I'm sure that you experience this also, when you get into deep astrophysics and the string theory and all of these things, at some point it comes down to belief. It always comes down to belief. You have
Absolutely.
to decide to believe something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have to choose believing in science or religion. It's not an either or.
I agree totally with that.
Yeah. So, okay, I interrupted though. So your friend, so you accidentally convince your friend to stay in the church. What
Well,
does
no,
that do for you? Or
oh, at the time, I don't know, maybe it planted a seed. It wasn't like a big aha moment. But it is something that I think about now, I guess, a lot. Um, but then I don't know, I guess planting a seed is a good way to put it. But I also graduate college and
okay.
I majored in, it was a dual major, not a double major, but a dual major in philosophy and English, which is like one of the most useless career-wise degrees, but I would argue one of the best educations.
Okay.
So I I'm still in this dark place. I finished college. I'm not dating anyone. I have no idea what to do for a career. And I'm just like there, I don't feel like I really have a great future anyway, because I still kind of like don't really believe in marriage because, obviously
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
my parents. I never actually wanted kids growing up. That didn't change for a long time. Now I love my kids. I'm very happy I have them. But um, I just say that because like I'm just kind of looking at my life and I have no idea what to do or what I want. And it's just like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you said, you just have to decide what you're going to believe and what you're going to go after. And I just started thinking about like, what do I want? I want, okay, maybe I want to get married, but I want to be happy. And looking at the world, like, yeah, the church is like, I'm kind of annoyed with the church and I'm kind of angry at God, but like a lot of people in the church they seem to be pretty happy. And they, like what I had before my parents got divorced, that was pretty ideal. Like, there's a good moral system in the church. The church does a lot of good um, around the world, a lot of charity, like charitable work, disaster relief. I trust the church the way it's run. I'm just kind of thinking about this, and I have a different friend who was very very bitter about the church and had left the church, and he was like, well, I bet you're just gonna marry some RM and have perfect little kids and go to church, and you're just gonna like be one of those people. And I said to him, yeah, I think I am. Like, I
Yeah.
think I am gonna do that.
Yeah.
Like,
That
what's
sounds like a
wrong?
terrible life. Why would you ever choose that life? That's horrible.
Exactly. And after I met my husband and was engaged, he said, he's like, I knew you were gonna do that. And that's always bothered me because I'm like, yeah, I told you I was.
Yeah.
But that, like, there wasn't even like a turning point. It was just, I was just kind of like, hey, I'm gonna go back to church. Okay, I'm gonna start reading my scriptures. Okay, I'm gonna start saying my prayers and just kind of see what happens. I was never like, this is definitely what I believe. Now I'm committed. It was just like, I don't know what I believe. I don't know if I believe in it, but this is a choice I'm going to make. I'm going to just act and see what happens. And it was again, I still, when you ask me, have you had an experience that turns you to the Savior? I still just like, I can't think of an experience. It's just kind of
Yeah.
like I have very, very slowly, and I don't want to say painfully, but like it's like the seed that Alma tells you to plant, the seed of faith. I have planted the seed and I have watered it and it is growing.
Yes.
That's all I can say. And it has grown a lot.
Was it was it Elder Bednar or may have been someone else that talked about sometimes we have experiences in our life where somebody flips on the light switch and it's on, and sometimes we have experiences where the sun rises
Right,
and it
exactly.
just slowly gets lighter and lighter.
Yes. Yes. And the sun has never been so bright in my life. I'm so grateful. so grateful that I made those decisions.
Okay. So earlier in our interview, you talked about how it's logic gets you what it gets you, but it's the emotion that makes relationships enjoyable.
Mhm.
And what I heard in my mind was, look, logic is the meat and potatoes, but emotion is the spice, is the flavor. Um,
Absolutely.
so tell me about, I mean, you kind of made this logical decision to go back to church. You looked back on your life. The happiest times were when I was had the church. So I'm going to experiment with this, but I don't know if I believe or not, but I'm going to
Mhm.
experience with it. Tell me now, um, has there been any seasoning yet?
Oh
Or
yeah.
is it still just logical for you?
No, 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 no. I would say definitely I've gotten to that point where I like we reread the New Testament this year for Come Follow Me, right? We're reading it, and it one thing that's weird about leaving the church, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I feel like it's often true. You forget so quickly. Forget like the things that you've learned so quickly. And during the time that I was not going to church, my peers were on missions studying the gospel every day. So I have felt like I am so behind on just like knowing the basics. Um, but yeah, this year with the New Testament, I feel like I'm reading the New Testament for the first time. And it's just so amazing to read the scriptures. I can't believe I'm saying this. This is not me, but it is me. It's who I want to be. Like reading the scriptures, there's so much seasoning in there. There's so much hope in there. There's so many answers. There are so many just good principles. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question right, but I would I feel like I am so happy and there's so much safety in the gospel. And for me, that's the seasoning. Like the world has only gotten crazier and crazier. Either that or I've just gotten older and I know more about it. But like I don't have to be crazy with the world. I am calm. I feel safe. I feel happy.
Yes.
And and I feel like I'm grounded in the right things. I don't put my identity or my testimony in family or in, everything always going well. It's in Christ. And because of that, like every other part of my life just feels more secure.
That is so key. I wish that could be to take a phrase out of my former stake president's book. I wish that could be cross stitched and put upon everybody's mantle place. Your identity isn't in a good marriage. Hopefully, that's a fruit of action, but your identity isn't in having perfect kids or a successful job or anything along those lines. Your identity is in Christ, and
Right.
with that, you can survive anything. Doesn't mean
Exactly.
it'll be easy, and you may get a lot of mud on your pants,
Mhm.
but you're going to tromp through it, and you're going to do it because that's where your identity is.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your marriage. Tell us about your husband.
Oh, he's great. So it's a miracle. It is a miracle that I met him. He is from the family that I used to have growing
Okay.
up. Everyone's active. Um, you know, his parents, they want to serve a mission, they're gonna go serve a mission soon, like just like perfect Mormon family, right? I mean, they have their issues, but he's just like so straight arrow. Um, he's never really questioned his testimony. He served a mission. He's great. And the time I met him, I was still kind of coming out of this. I still wasn't completely convinced, I guess, by the church. And
Yes.
um, he was not the type of guy I was dating. Every other guy I dated, probably, I don't think they had served missions, weren't active. So it is just a miracle that I not only met, his name's Josh, met Josh, but that he wanted to marry me. And he knew of these like rough parts of me gospel wise, and he tells me that he prayed about it and Heavenly Father was just like, just don't worry about it, like just trust me, she'll be fine. um
That's great.
and he'll tell you I have grown a lot since he met me. in a lot of different ways. But yeah, he's one of the only people I would say that I am fully comfortable talking about the gospel with. I'm still not comfortable talking about it very much. It's part of it is I don't like talking about feelings and being vulnerable. And part of it is I feel like when you go inactive, everyone kind of judges you a little bit.
Sure.
And I get that. And I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit of a scarlet letter sometimes when you say, yeah, I've questioned the church. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm getting off topic a little bit. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think, unfortunately, I think a lot of people feel that way. And that's why, again, I think there's this hesitancy to talk about people's experiences. And by no means do I think that we all need to get together and share our doubts about the church. No, no,
Right.
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm
No.
saying is let's share our real experiences with people, especially when they are edifying experiences, because I think a lot of us struggle. A lot of us have questions. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think the Lord is saying, I mean, if people were asking, the Lord would say about a lot of us, don't worry about the rough spots. It'll
Right.
work out. Don't worry
Right.
about it.
Yeah.
But sometimes we are so concerned about maintaining the perfect image and
Mm-hmm.
being that straight arrow RM, relief society president, whatever, that
Right.
we rob other people from the opportunity of learning from our experiences. Saying, hey,
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you my experience, and hopefully you can take some shortcuts. Hopefully you don't have to walk the path that I did.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you do, it's okay. We still love you, and there's a spot for you in the church, and we're going to hug you when you're ready to come back.
Exactly. I was reading through some old journals to prepare for this, and I read one where I wrote something. They're all very dramatic, but I wrote something like, "Why is everyone trying to tell me what to do? All I am doing is taking a step back and deciding what I believe. Like this is a good thing." But I mean, I understand. I'm a mom now. Like if my kids wanted to leave the church, I do want them to find their own way. But I would be like
Sure.
I get that. But when you're in that mindset of like looking for faults in church and in believers, and you get that reaction from people who are in the church, like, oh, what are you doing? You're lost. You need to, just buck up and come back. Like that feels like a lack of love, even if it comes
Mm-hmm.
from a place of love.
Yeah.
So I feel like the best thing we can do when people question the church is just be like, great, like that doesn't change anything when it comes to me and you.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I was just going to ask you that. And going back to something that you said earlier, nobody, myself or nobody else on this show is an expert at all. All we can share are the experiences that we've had. So,
Yes.
based on the experiences that you've had, what do you wish people would say? And you already kind of answered it, but is there
Mhm.
anything more that you'd say on what would have helped you in this time of how active members of the church interacted with you?
Um, I think I think honestly, just like taking an interest in me as a person and not me as a member of the church. Um, and not trying to like rush and fix my problems, but just kind of be like, just be a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, lead by example. I There are a lot of people in my ward whose children have left the church and they're very anxious about it. And again, I get that anxiety, but I just want to say, like, just love. Just love. That's all you need to do. And it's hard because we're taught to like we hear stories about, oh, this person said this thing, and that's what brought me back to the church. So we're always like, oh, we want to be the instrument in the Lord's hand. We want to say the phrase or the question that changes their mind. And it's important to listen to revelation, of course. If you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need to say something, follow that prompting. But I think we need to really just focus on loving that person and and we want when and if people come back to the church, we want them to come back because of us, meaning because of our example, because of our love, not in spite of us.
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. One of my favorite stories is somebody told just a member told it where they had a very rebellious childhood and they were always doing all the things that a rebellious young lady would do. And parents talking to her and talking and really kind of going. And she said that there was one evening where her mom came down and they had like a 30-minute conversation. Both of them are crying. Uh, Mom feels like there's a real turnaround experience. Fantastic. Problem solved. Ah, we're done. Thank goodness. Mom gets up and the daughter turns around and eventually comes back into full activity and testimony. Later, the daughter says, Mom, do you know why I returned to the church? And the mom says, Yeah, it was because of that conversation that we had, that experience. And she says, No, Mom, that night I told you exactly what you wanted to hear because I know that. And as soon as you left, I climbed out my window like I'd done 100 times before, and I started walking over to the party or wherever I was going to go. And as I was walking and leaving the house, I looked over and there was your bedroom window, and I saw you kneeling at your bed praying. And that's what clicked for me. That's when everything changed for me. I hate to tell you, Mom, but it didn't have anything to do with what you said. I was completely feeding you whatever line you needed to hear.
mm-hmm.
And I just think that there's a lot of experiences like that where, yes, we do want to be that one person that says the magic word, but mostly it's probably going to be how they feel. Probably going to be how they
Absolutely.
feel that
Right. Going back to the logic thing, you don't make decisions like that based on logic. You make it based on feeling.
yeah.
And if someone makes me feel like trying to guilt me or pressure me into the church or badger me or lecture me, I mean, all of these are experiences that I've had. It's like you're making me not want to go. And now, when I do come back, I don't want to talk to you about it ever.
Yeah.
And I still have relationships where I'm just like, I don't want to talk about it because I don't feel like you accepted me then. And so I don't want you to be part of that part of me now. And it's prideful on my part. I get that. I still have growing to do.
Sure.
It's a
As
really,
do all of us.
yeah.
Okay, so I want as we're kind of wrapping up here, at one point you expressed that there was a lot of anger towards God.
Mhm.
You're coming back to the church, testimony's growing. Talk to me about the repair process of that relationship and how that feels. What happens there?
Yeah. Again, this is a slow process. I think, well, first of all, I didn't really realize that's how I felt. My husband would always be like, I think you're just angry with God. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. Which is like, pretty
Don't
big
tell me I'm not
sign.
angry. Yeah,
Exactly. Um, and I felt like I had to just first, I guess the first step was realizing I did feel like God gave me my family back and then took it away. I did feel like that was his fault. He didn't save us. I always hate when people are like, you need to figure out like how to be thankful for trials. And I'm like, he could have taught me these lessons other ways than my family being torn apart. And I think I've had to like kind of realize that he didn't do it. It
sure.
wasn't God. And um, and I think it's just kind of been a slow process to trust that there are better things. I mean, you get so myopic when you go through a trauma. Like this is the rest of my life. I'm never gonna have a successful marriage. You just kind of have to trust. And I think that trust has helped me to release that anger. And um, I don't know, it's easy now because I have a really great life right now. And so I feel like it's always easier to be grateful when you um when things are all going well. But I just think it's been the slow process of praying and reading my scriptures and learning who God is, who Jesus is, and how they feel about me that has helped me to not feel the anger that I had before.
Yeah. Again, I so appreciate you being so real with your experience and your emotions because I think that um and a lot of times that relationship does take a long time to repair and to build. And it's really tempting to try to fast forward to the end and say, oh, nope, everything's great. Yep, that was a tough spot, but I'm fine now. Everything's fine. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't do you any good. And it
Right.
doesn't do anybody else any good for you to pretend. And I think that being able to have a real relationship with your Heavenly Father and hopefully being able to say, hey, I was really upset with you. I don't want to be upset. And I know that you can help me not be upset, but I'm not there yet. I'm still a little upset. I'm still a little confused. So over the next 1, 5, 10 years, could you help me work on that?
Right. Even just praying for the desire, like I
Yeah.
think Emma says, that's a fine place to start.
Yep. Thanks again for taking time. Really appreciate it.